I opened myself up to receive in operating out of those spirits at a very young age because I saw the power in it. The enemy got a hook in me, and I became in agreement with his plans at a young age, which was to seduce people, to feel in control, to manipulate people, to feel in control.
Welcome to Arise My Love, where my mission is to equip and empower you to break free from toxic cycles, guiding you toward a life of fulfillment and joy. I'm your host, Angela Thorne, and my journey wasn't easy. For 20 years, I was trapped in addiction and exploitation, all stemming from a childhood filled with rejection and abuse. As a survivor of abuse, exploitation, and sex trafficking, I found myself in desperate need of something different. Ever since 2018, I have been on a journey of intentional daily healing that has led me to be radically changed forever. Now I'm committed to helping other women find the same freedom. Join me as we embark on this transformative journey together.
Good morning and welcome to episode 3. I will tell you that this episode has had the most warfare around it. I think there's a breakthrough in this episode. I don't know if it's breakthrough for you all or breakthrough for me, because I'll share with you that every time I tell my story, whether it's in written form when I'm writing my story in my book, or when I am on a stage sharing my testimony for an audience, or if I am recording it like this, sharing it with the world, to see that there is a healing aspect to that. There is an actual modality out there through the Allure Center where they believe in the power of storytelling, which is our testimony. And we know in scripture that the Lord tells us that there's power in our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. So with all that to say, I get another revelation or another level of healing every time I tell my story. Let's jump right into it. So last episode, we talked about the importance of opening a narrative with your kids, no matter their age, on body safety, body autonomy, empowering and equipping them to say no when they're feeling uncomfortable, talking to you when something may have happened that traumatized them. They won't know that it's trauma, but just allowing that safety net to be you for when they go through something. We also talked about a snippet of my story of how I was molested by friends that were girls in a young age, 5 to 12, on and off. What I want to dive into on this episode is what that did to me. I'm not going to get into the scientific and the psychological part of this because we could take up probably a whole series on that if I'm being honest. I just want to tell you what it looked like for me. And so this episode will essentially encompass red flags of somebody that's going through abuse of some form. For me specifically, it was sexual abuse. I will say that one of the first signs that I started displaying, or I'll just go real deep, like internally what was happening to me. The first thing that I started experiencing internally was the feeling of shame and the feeling of guilt that I wasn't talking about it. So shame and guilt are one of the oldest tricks in the book from the enemy, and he can't create anything on his own, so he'll just use some truths, biblical truths even, and twist them just a little bit to create a hook in people, to bring them into this lie of I should be ashamed or I should feel guilty. And they're little lies that will snare us and bring us deeper and eventually rooting that lie into our belief system. And that's what happened to me whenever I was a little bit older. I know when I was really young, there was a lot of anger, jealousy. There were some girls where it just happened one time, or maybe one or two times at sleepovers, but it wasn't like repeated over a long period of time. However, there was one girl where this was happening. There were so many emotions just entangled with that friendship. But the biggest one was definitely anger. Like, that was the biggest one, anger and jealousy. Because I could not differentiate healthy relationship with the toxic relationship that we were in, the secretive part of our friendship. I would say the anger and the jealousy started really early, but as I got older and had more complex feelings and emotions, I guess I could say, is whenever that shame and guilt settled in. When I pushed those feelings down, instead of talking about them, there were a lot of outbursts, inexplainable outbursts that I would have at home. Things would bubble up and just explode, essentially, because I didn't have an outlet to talk about everything that I was experiencing. And I'll just mention, like, the sexual abuse is just one aspect of things that I was dealing with at that age. I was in public school and I was bullied beyond belief. I had really bad acne. I had crooked teeth. We weren't complete poverty ridden, but we were definitely skating on that line. We did not have a lot of money when I was growing up. And I will say, like, I didn't have the best clothes. I didn't always have the best hairstyles. And honestly, I didn't care about those things. Like, I wore what I wanted to wear and I felt on top of the world. I was always very eclectic and strange and creative with the things I wore. However, kids at school are just mean. There are some people out there that just don't have a gauge for kindness. And I had to ride the bus to school, and there was just straight up mean people that made fun of my acne, made fun of the clothes I wore, made fun of my teeth, made fun of my hair. You name it, I was bullied for it. Got made fun of for being nice to people, for not picking one particular group of friends. I just loved people. I particularly loved to hang out with people that were essentially outcasts. I just loved making people feel welcome because I knew what it felt like to be outcasted. So since I hung out with those people, I was, again, made fun of. And kind of guilty by association. Well, you hang out with them, so you're those kind of people. So it's just very cliquey. It was just an unhealthy environment. So on top of all of the abuse that I was enduring and not able to process out loud with anybody, I was getting bullied at school. And then on top of all of that, we had a broken family at home. I observed my parents going through a rocky relationship pretty early. Eventually leading to my dad moving out a couple of times. He would always move back in, but by the time I hit 10 years old, they did end their marriage and got a divorce. Just throw that on top of the pile of confusion and trauma and everything else. So there was just this big, like, entanglement. If you could picture it as, like, when you make those rubber band balls, and you tie them and tie them and tie them and tie them, and eventually it just makes this giant ball. Imagine that's what it looks like. And that was my trauma. That was my mess of things I needed to work through. A lot of people call it onion layers, but for me, like, those are clean layers, and they are, like, so easy to peel apart. Like, that is not what trauma looks like at all. It looks more like or even like a tangled ball of yarn. I think that would be a really great way, because even like rubber bands, you can just start cutting and they snap off. Like some layers of trauma do look like that, but for the most part, it looks like a tangled ball of yarn where you have to just start pulling at that one loose piece of yarn, and slowly it'll start unraveling. You'll hit some spots that are all knotted and tangled up, and it's impossible to get through, so you have to like start carefully picking away at it. That is a great analogy for what complex PTSD looks like. And unfortunately, at such an early age for me, I was already dealing with that much complex trauma. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. My human body was suffering so badly on the inside, I became desperate to fix it. Our human body was not designed to endure that level of pain. It was just straight up pain, and I needed it to stop at all costs. Around 10 years old, when my parents divorced, my mom was gone a lot. I was able to kind of like hang out with whoever I wanted to hang out with, essentially. My mom vetted as best as she could, but she was just very trusting. Some parents of the kids that I hung out with did not hesitate to lie to my parents as far as like their character and what they were about, because they would like smile at their faces. Oh yeah, she's in great hands, you know. They would lie to them and then turn around and let us go do whatever we wanted. We could leave with boys, we could have boys over, we could drink, we could smoke, we could party. They didn't care. And so whenever I began to enter into that space, I found comfort in smoking cigarettes. That was like my first gateway, if you will, outside of the sexual abuse. But like as far as substances go, smoking cigarettes was the first thing that I tried at 10 years old. And I found this odd sense of comfort in it. I don't know why. It was just the addiction aspect of it. Unfortunately, I have addiction that runs pretty deep in my bloodline and my generational line. I was no exception to that, and addiction sucked me in real quick. And first it started with cigarettes, then it was alcohol, and alcohol was introduced in my life around 12. Not introduced, I've seen it, I was around it, but I started consuming it around the age of 12. And from there, it just went deeper and deeper. 14, I tried pot for the first time. And then 15, I tried harder drugs for the first time. And then I just went deeper and deeper and deeper and tried more things and more things and more things. Eventually just being a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict by the time I was, I would say, 14. And the root of all of it was my trauma. It was the shame, it was the guilt, it was the anger, it was the resentment, it was the grief. It was so many things that were entangled in my spirit and my soul and my body. It was just all just so tangled up that I desperately needed relief. Eventually, sex became pornography, and sex became part of that entanglement that brought comfort. That led me, okay, so whatever, I'm not going to really touch on pornography in this episode. That's going to be a whole episode of itself. But I do want to talk about the aspect of hypersexualization. Obviously, you know my story of the younger years, like my core years, and that being distorted through molestation. But once I got to be of the age of about 12, I'll say I was aware of what power I had over other people through my looks and through my body. This all began through magazines that I was reading, Cosmopolitan, Teen Vogue. Those kinds of magazines perpetuated hypersexualization of girls. So it really fed this spirit of seduction and lust and manipulation. It really honed in on, oh, you know, if you wear this makeup or if you talk this way, If you dress this way, you'll get all the boys you want. Uh, Very much new age manifestation, if you will. Like, they didn't call it back then, but that's very much what it was. And astrology and all those things. I took a liking to all of that because it made me feel in control. It made me feel powerful, and it fed that. And so not only were the magazines perpetuating this, but so was the music I listened to. I listened to mainstream music that's just awful. I go back and listen to the lyrics of some of the songs that I just sang and listen to on repeat, and it's all just sexual deviancy and horrible. Some of the movies, not some, all of the movies pretty much that I watched back then were just not appropriate. So I was learning these things by other friend groups. I was consuming this content in media form, if you will. You could say that, like, the culture groomed me to be open to receive what was going on in my reality and not push it away. So by the time I was 12, I was very aware of the power that I had in the realm of seduction and manipulation through the way I carried myself and acted. And I did find a sense of power in that. It takes a lot of vulnerability to admit that, but I was so young. Like, I feel a lot of grief for my younger self, but I've done a lot of work, healing work to get through that, to where I can just boldly admit that to you all. This is what I'm going to say, because I know that probably, like, I know for some might shock you because that was not your reality at all. Or that might really trigger you because it is and was your reality. And unfortunately, like, that spirit of lust and seduction can stay with you your whole life if you're not aware of it, or if you're willing to, like, ignore it. I know it is my call and it is my purpose on this earth to come against the spirit of seduction and lust. Some denominations, if you will call it the spirit of Jezebel. Jezebel is a person. She was a queen in the Bible who was terribly seductive, manipulative, used lust to her advantage. So a lot of denominations will use her as an example of what spirit is operating in culture. So the spirit of Jezebel is a trigger word for a lot of people because a lot of religious groups will use it as a weapon. Unfortunately, a lot of people will use the spirit of Jezebel against people, and they just do not operate with the love of Christ when it comes around that word. So I'm going to choose not to really use that very much. However, the deeper look of Jezebel, I feel like that's like an umbrella term of seduction, lust, manipulation, wrath, anger. Like, there are all these roots that are within that woman. There are a lot of deeper things than just this generalization of that spirit. I opened myself up to receive in operating out of those spirits at a very young age because I saw the power in it. The enemy got a hook in me, and I became in agreement with his plans at a young age, which was to seduce people, to feel in control, to manipulate people, to feel in control. It was such a lie. Gosh, if I could have learned how much of a lie that was so much earlier in life, I just know that, of course, my life would look so different. I think God created me to be such a hard head and to be a person that people say you have to learn the hard way. That was me. I just always took the curiosity route versus the path of truth that I could have just lived by and had faith in and just operated on there, like where I'm at now. I don't need to know any of that anymore. I just know what the truth is. I know what the way is, and I know what the life is, and that's Jesus Christ. And I'm just going to follow him because my life is much more fruitful that way, and good fruit. I have fruits of the Spirit on that narrow path. Instead, when I was younger, I ate from the tree of knowledge, and that looked a lot like the New Age realm. I'll just put it that way because that is a huge term. There's so much within the New Age belief system. But I started eating from that fruit at such a young age because my spirit was already open to the spirit realm. I was so susceptible to the spirit realm from birth, basically, because that's just how God created me. I'm very, very sensitive to all of that. So I had a fertile heart and a fertile spirit and soul to receive the things of the spirit. And the enemy knows those people. Like, he's scouting the world for those fertile spirits so he can start trying to sow lies into them. And unfortunately, a culture snatched me up and started sowing all of those seeds of lies at such a young age. But with all of the things that I went through, I will say the main ones that I know I'm here to come up against, to shed light on, to speak truth out into this world about is tearing down the power over seduction, manipulation, control, lust, sexual deviancy, like all of those things. It's my call to come against those and to speak truth into those lies, because that's all they are. And if we really, as kingdom children, as people of God, those that operate with the authority that we're given as children of God, and we see it from a heavenly perspective, like if we're looking at it from a worldly perspective, we will be scared of these spirits because they do seem big, they do seem powerful, and the enemy wants nothing more than you to see it as such. And so what we have to do, what I know I'm called to do, is go above that. Go above all of those things and sit in heavenly places where we are called to be and have the perspective of heaven. Tap into that and look at the spirits from that perspective. We'll see actually that it is so small. It is so powerless. And we know that we already carry the victory. We just have to have the faith that carries the victory. And we have to carry the authority of victory. And I know I am being called to step into that place so that I can share with all of you who are feeling lost, broken, hurt by those spirits that got you at such a young age through all of the things I've went through. So that's why I share my story, because I want you to hear parts of my story. It might not be the whole thing, but bits and pieces of my story that go, dang, I went through that and I never realized. Perhaps that's what's caused my addiction, or perhaps that's what's caused my anger, or that's what's caused me to be stuck in toxic cycles that I feel like I can never get out of. All of those are such big lies. That is not your forever. That is not your truth. We just have to come into a place where you can see through, see past all of those things. And I know it takes time. I know it is a process. There are some things that we are promised whenever you say yes to Jesus Christ. There are some things that when you get baptized, when you go down into that water and you come back up, there are things that will instantaneously be ripped out of you or be lifted off of your back. These burdens and these heavy yokes will just fly off of you. So there are things that will instantaneously be lifted. However, most of that entanglement that I talked about in the very beginning of this episode, that yarn, the tangled ball of yarn, it's just going to take a process to get through it. So I am no stranger to knowing that it takes time. Time is on our side when it comes to healing wounds. We cannot see past our own wounding in our heart until we start healing it. We cannot. It's going to be so incredibly difficult to rise above all of that and step into the heavenly realm to get a heavenly perspective until we start healing those wounds. That's why I'm so passionate about the importance of healing past trauma. We cannot step into our authority. We cannot operate in our purpose and our destiny until we start facing our pain. Like, we are stepping into a time where it is so important to start healing. Like, we have to, because the Lord needs his soldiers. The Lord needs his warriors to come out of their wounding so they can operate in their purpose and destiny. So I am urging you, hear my urgency. And what I am telling you today is we have to start. We have to start. If any part of what I have talked about in this episode pulled on a heartstring, because that's the very beginning of that entanglement, if you're feeling that unction to take the first step towards healing or take the first step towards being a follower of Jesus Christ, I want you to feel empowered to do just that. The spirit of seduction, the spirit of lust, the spirit of sexual deviancy, anger, wrath, control, manipulation, all of those things are lies, and those are not your truth. There is another truth, there is another way, and there is another life, and that is through Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And so I hope you're just at a place where you can receive that, and I want to help you. So let me know if I can. I hope this episode blesses you, and I can't wait till we get to dive deeper into how I came out of a life of abuse, trauma, addiction, sex trafficking, exploitation, all of those horrible things, and now living a life that I am thriving in. See you next time. Love you.
Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.